On a calm morning, a cool breeze gently touched the sleeping city like a soft whisper. On the rooftop of Adaku Holdings, the most prestigious high-rise in the city, Ifeoma Adaku sat alone. She hugged her knees to her chest, her long dark hair fluttering in the wind. Dressed in a patterned yellow hoodie and faded jeans, she looked nothing like the heiress of Adaku Holdings, the largest banking and investment empire. Staring blankly at the horizon, she was lost in heavy thoughts. Just 3 months earlier, she had been at one of the best universities in the United States. Back then, everything seemed easy. No big responsibilities, no pressure. Her father, Obinna Adaku, had called her his little girl who could do no wrong. She was supposed to stay free, chase dreams, travel, and live a quiet life while her older brother, Chinedu Adaku, ran the family business. But life had other plans. A terrible car crash took her father, mother, and brother all at once. One phone call, one night, and everything she loved was gone. She held her hoodie tighter, but the cold inside her chest couldn't be fixed. She had stood by the graveside, numb, watching dirt fall on 3 coffins. Her father, her mother, her brother, all gone. Now, at just 23, she was alone. She had 2 younger siblings to protect and a crumbling empire on her shoulders. The board told her to step aside. Aunties and uncles whispered, telling her to let the experienced ones take over, but she saw their greed. If she didn't fight back, they'd destroy her father's legacy, selling it off and leaving her and her siblings with nothing. Even the strongest get tired. That night, Ifeoma left the mansion without telling anyone, needing a place to breathe and cry without being judged. She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked down at the dark city below, feeling the weight of the world on her small shoulders. At the main entrance far below, a young security guard named Tunde Badmus adjusted the sleeves of his cheap red uniform. He looked up at Adaku Holdings, the tall glass building reflecting the soft orange light of the rising sun like a giant mirror. His back hurt from the long night shift, but he stayed alert. His job was simple: watch, guard, report. Nothing exciting, nothing like what he dreamed of when he graduated top of his class 2 years ago. Tunde had a first-class degree in business administration, a sharp mind for solving complex problems, and a heart that believed hard work would pay off. But in the real world, dreams meant little without powerful connections. He yawned, glanced up again, and froze. At the very edge of the rooftop, he saw a young woman, standing too close, looking fragile and alone. His heart began to race. "No, please no," he whispered, running toward the emergency stairs. He didn't know her, but that didn't matter. All that mattered was stopping her before something terrible happened. His boots hit the metal steps hard, the sound echoing in the empty stairwell as he ran upward. Every second was precious. His lungs burned, but he kept going, imagining the wind pulling at her clothes. He burst onto the rooftop, the heavy door banging against the wall. Startled by the noise, Ifeoma turned around. She took a step back and slipped. A quick gasp escaped her lips as the edge came too close. Tunde moved without thinking. In 2 fast strides, he grabbed her arm and steadied her with both hands. Her body shook. "It's okay," he said softly, still breathing hard. "You're safe now." Ifeoma held on to him for a moment, her heart pounding. She hadn't planned to scare anyone. She just needed air. But now, standing in a stranger's protective arms, the pain inside felt ready to spill out. Tunde let her go slowly, making sure she could stand. "I'm sorry," Ifeoma said quickly, wiping her tears with her sleeve. I wasn't trying to do anything bad. I just needed to think." Tunde studied her face, and in her eyes he saw it. Grief, exhaustion, and a sadness far too heavy for someone so young. He nodded, believing her. "I understand," he said gently, without judgment. The wind filled the silence between them. Finally, Tunde spoke. "I'm Tunde. I work security here." Ifeoma hesitated, then nodded. I'm Ifeoma, she whispered, not saying her last name. Tunde smiled, a little warmer this time. Nice to meet you, Ifeoma, he said, as if they were meeting on a sunny street instead of on the edge of heartbreak. She let out a small, broken laugh. You too, she replied. They stood side by side, quietly watching the city lights come on. No words, just two strangers with their own battles, finding calm in an unexpected moment. When Ifeoma finally turned to leave, Tunde didn't press her for answers. He only said, "Take care of yourself." For the first time in a long while, she believed she could. She looked back and smiled. Small, but real. Tunde nodded and returned to his post. Ifeoma stood there with a lighter heart. She had come looking for air, but she had found something better. A reminder that good people still existed, even in a world full of greed and cold ambition. Neither of them knew it yet, but that stumble, that catch, and that shared glance was the start of everything. The days after meeting Tunde on the rooftop passed in a blur. Ifeoma returned to her exhausting routine, endless meetings with lawyers and board members whose eyes were full of greed. They smiled politely, but she could feel them secretly planning how to tear apart her father's empire. Every handshake felt fake. Every conversation tasted like betrayal. She hated it. At night, when the mansion was silent and she could hear only her own breathing, her mind went back to him. Tunde, the stranger who never asked what she owned or how much money she had. He had looked at her like she was just a person, not a prize. She didn't know why he stayed in her thoughts. Maybe it was because for those few minutes on the rooftop, she hadn't been the heiress Ifeoma Adaku. She had just been Ifeoma. Meanwhile, Tunde kept working his usual security shifts at Adaku Holdings. But now, he often found himself glancing toward the rooftops, half expecting to see her again. He didn't know why he cared so much. She was just some troubled girl, right? Still, he hoped she was okay. He hoped she hadn't slipped back into the sadness that had brought her there that night. Almost a week later, fate stepped in. Ifeoma returned to Adaku Holdings in the evening, wearing simple clothes with her hood up and sunglasses on. She wasn't there as the heiress, just a shadow moving through familiar spaces. She didn't want to go to the rooftop this time. Instead, she wandered into the courtyard, where a small fountain spilled water into a marble pool. She sat by the fountain, listening to the gentle splashes, pretending she was nobody important. Now and then, she saw him, Tunde, the security guard, who had saved her without knowing who she really was. He didn't hover around or ask questions. He simply did his job, checking the gates, helping tenants with groceries, giving directions to lost delivery drivers. But Ifeoma noticed something. Whenever she sat there, he quietly adjusted his patrol so he passed by more often. He never disturbed her, never made her feel watched, just made sure she was safe. Then came the rainy afternoon that told her everything she needed to know. She was sitting by the fountain again, lost in her thoughts, when the clouds suddenly broke open. Heavy rain poured down without warning. People around her rushed for shelter, umbrellas popping open, car horns blaring. Ifeoma sat frozen for a moment, startled by the storm. Then, before she could even move, a warm jacket was gently placed over her shoulders. She looked up through the rain and saw Tunde, his uniform soaked, hair dripping and stuck to his forehead. He was holding a cheap black umbrella over her head. "You'll catch a cold," he said simply, his voice calm but firm over the noise of the rain. Ifeoma's throat felt tight. She wasn't used to someone caring for her like this, without a camera flashing or a business card being handed over. "I'm okay," she whispered, though her voice cracked a little. Tunde gave her a small smile and held the umbrella steady as she got up. "Come on," he said. "There's a dry spot near the west entrance." He didn't offer his hand or try to touch her. He just walked quietly ahead, keeping the umbrella over her. He took the side, getting hit by the rain, not complaining once. By the time they reached the covered archway, Ifeoma's heart was beating fast, and it wasn't because of the weather. "Thank you," she said, pulling his jacket tighter around her. Tunde nodded, His kindness as steady as before. Just doing my job, he replied. But Ifeoma knew better. No job paid enough for that kind of thoughtfulness. She watched him walk back into the rain, jacketless, soaked to the skin, and realized something that scared her. She didn't just feel grateful, she wanted to know him. Not as a stranger in uniform, but as the man who had saved her in more ways than one. The next morning, Ifeoma went back to Adaku Holdings, this time on purpose. She wore the same hoodie and faded jeans. No makeup, no expensive heels, no shiny jewelry. She didn't want to look like an heiress. She wanted to look like herself. She sat by the fountain again, pretending to read a book, but really just waiting, her heart beating nervously. Sure enough, Tunde appeared, checking the west gate and writing on his clipboard. His face was serious, but calm. When he glanced at the fountain, their eyes met. Ifeoma gave a small, shy smile. Tunde nodded politely and kept walking. He wasn't being unfriendly, just careful. He had learned not to bother residents unless they called for him, especially when they seemed different from the rest. Ifeoma's heart sank. His respectfulness made it harder to start a conversation. She needed a reason, something small and natural. When she saw him making his rounds again, she called out, "Excuse me?" Tunde turned instantly, alert but calm. "Yes, miss?" "Could you help me with something?" she asked, lifting her book. "I can't connect to the building's free Wi-Fi." It was a harmless lie. She knew how to connect. She could probably run the tech department herself, but it was the only thing she could think of. Tunde walked over, keeping a respectful distance. "Let me see," he said, crouching beside her. He took her phone and tapped through the settings. Ifeoma watched quietly. His hands were steady, his movements gentle, with no sign of arrogance or judgment. "There," he said after a moment, handing the phone back. "You're connected now." "Thank you," she said with a smile. He stood up, looking slightly embarrassed. "No problem. Enjoy your day." But Ifeoma didn't want him to leave yet. She said quickly, standing before she lost her courage. "You've helped me twice now. Can I at least buy you a coffee?" Tunde blinked, surprised. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said softly, but firmly. He hesitated for a moment. Most residents only gave orders, never offered. But there was something about her tone. No demands, no flirting, just honesty. "All right," he said finally, a small smile appearing. "Coffee sounds good." They walked together to the small cafe across the street. No titles, no pretenses, just a girl and a boy, strangers to each other. Maybe, just maybe, the start of something neither had ever hoped for. The cafe smelled of fresh bread and strong coffee. It wasn't fancy, worn leather seats and wooden tables, but it was warm and real. Ifeoma and Tunde sat by the window, two steaming cups between them. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, turning city lights into soft, glowing colors. They sipped their drinks quietly, both unsure of what to say. Ifeoma kept sneaking glances at him. Up close, Tunde was nothing like the polished men she was used to. His face was rugged, with a small scar below his jaw. His hands were rough and real, not delicate like the wealthy people she knew. But there was something steady and safe about him. She wanted to know him. She wanted him to know her, not as heir to an empire, but just as Ifeoma, a girl who had lost everything and was trying to find herself again. "So," she said, lightly stirring her coffee, "how long have you been working at Adaku Holdings?" Tunde smiled softly. 6 months. "You like it?" He shrugged and set his cup down. "It's a job. It pays the bills." There was no bitterness in his voice, just honest truth. Ifeoma leaned forward. "What did you want to do before this?" He paused, then sighed, staring at the rainy street. "I graduated top of my class, business administration, full honors, scholarships." He paused again. "I thought I'd get a good job, help my sister through school, maybe even start my own business. But the world doesn't run on dreams. It runs on who you know, and I didn't know anybody." Ifeoma's chest tightened. She looked at him, really looked, and he added quietly, "I'm not ashamed. I take pride in what I do. It might not be what I dreamed of, but it's honest work, and it's mine." Ifeoma paused, feeling emotions she hadn't let herself feel before. "That's amazing," she said softly. Tunde let out a small laugh. "Most people don't think so." "Well, I'm not most people," she replied with a playful half-smile. Then he laughed too, a low, warm sound. And for the first time in a long while, Ifeoma felt something inside her shift. A crack in her grief. Hope. Maybe. She thought maybe the world still had goodness in it, hidden in far-off places, like in a tired young man with a simple uniform who was quietly stealing pieces of her heart, one kind moment at a time. The rain outside kept luring the street, making everything glisten. Ifeoma looked at her phone. Dead. No charge. She had left so fast that morning. No charger, no plan, no way home. She felt stranded. Tunde noticed her flinch. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Part of her wanted to lie and sort it out alone, but the deeper, more exhausted part of her just wanted help. "My phone's dead," she admitted. "I can't call a ride, and I don't have any cash." Tunde didn't hesitate. "You can stay here until it stops, or—" He rubbed the back of his neck, seeming awkward. "My place is just a few blocks away. Not much, but it's warm and dry." Ifeoma stared. Nothing pushy, nothing shady, just kindness. Her instincts told her not to trust a stranger, but looking into his eyes, she saw safety instead. "I would appreciate that," she whispered. He smiled, picked up their cups, and carried them to a bin. Then he grabbed his jacket and held the door. "Come on." They hurried through wet streets full of puddles and closed shops. Tunde stayed close, offering an arm when a careless cyclist splashed water in their direction. At last, they reached a small brick building with cracked steps. Up 2 flights of creaky stairs, he unlocked a plain wooden door. "Welcome to the palace," he joked with a grin. Inside was small, a mattress on the floor, a battered table, 2 mismatched chairs, and a gas stove in one corner. Thin curtains, bare walls, but clean. Tunde threw his wet jacket over a chair and offered her a towel. "Here," he said kindly. She dried her hair while he rummaged through a cupboard. "I have some leftover jollof rice from last night," he said, a little shy. "It's not fancy, but it's warm." Ifeoma's smile was real and grateful. "Sounds perfect," she said. Moments later, they sat cross-legged on the mattress, eating from chipped plates. The rice was simple, but rich with comfort. They talked about everything and nothing. Favorite foods, childhood memories, dreams that once felt close but now seemed far away. And in that moment, Ifeoma didn't feel like an heiress. She didn't feel crushed by grief or future expectations. She felt alive. Early the next morning, sunlight softly lit the tiny apartment, making it feel peaceful and warm. Ifeoma woke up to the smell of frying eggs. She blinked, surprised by how normal everything felt. No big mansion, no stiff silence, just a small room with a mattress, a cracked window, and the smell of home. She saw Tunde cooking at the stove, humming quietly. Dressed in his old t-shirt and track pants, he flipped eggs, like he'd done it thousands of times. "You're up?" he asked, smiling. "Sorry I stayed over," she said, embarrassed. He just shrugged. "You needed shelter. That's what matters." He placed a simple breakfast of eggs and bread on the table. It wasn't fancy, but to Ifeoma, it was beautiful. They ate and talked about small things. A stray cat visiting his window, her loud neighbor stomping at 2 a.m. They laughed like old friends. For a moment, the demanding, rich world outside faded. Later, back in the mansion, Ifeoma couldn't stop thinking about Tunde's story. A top graduate, hardworking, honest, ignored by a world blind to his worth. Her anger grew, thinking of her father's companies filled with lazy men who got good jobs just because of their names. Tunde deserved better. Without overthinking, she called Mr. John, her father's trusted executive. She arranged a management trainee job at Adaku Holdings for Tunde, making it look natural, recruitment standard, no trace of her involvement. When she hung up, excitement and fear swirled inside her. She didn't want to buy affection, only to give him a fair shot. A few days later, her phone buzzed. "Ifeoma, you won't believe this." "Believe what?" she replied. "I got a job." Tunde's voice was full of wonder. "Management trainee at Adaku Logistics. They found my old application and offered me the role." Tears threatened as she hugged her phone. "That's amazing," she said, meaning every word. He laughed, telling her about his mother's excitement. She smiled and congratulated him again and again, never letting him know she had helped. He deserved this. He earned it. That evening, Tunde cleaned his small apartment and even bought a cake with a congratulations candle for their celebration. He invited Ifeoma over, and she came quickly, wearing simple clothes and her brightest smile. He greeted her nervously. She stepped inside, and the apartment felt like home. They sat at the little table, chocolate cake before them. He said shyly, "I know it's nothing special." She shook her head, heart full. "It's perfect." They laughed over their messy table manners while eating. Tunde was excitedly describing his new office, with its glass walls, smart desks, and a proper coffee machine. "I still can't believe they want me," he said, shaking his head. "They're lucky to have you," Ifeoma replied, meaning every word. Later that night, after the cake was gone and the world had quieted, they sat side by the window watching distant city lights. Tunde turned to her, serious now. "I don't know where this road will lead," he said, "but wherever it goes, I want you there with me." Ifeoma's heart clenched painfully. She wanted that too, more than anything, but the secret between them felt heavier with each moment. She looked at Tunde, this wonderful man who saw her simply as Ifeoma, not as an heiress, and she knew she couldn't keep lying forever. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tunde brushed a strand of hair from her face first. "You're special, Ifeoma," he whispered. "I knew it the moment I saw you on that rooftop." Ifeoma knew the secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. When the truth came out, it could either bring them closer or tear everything apart. And then it happened faster than she'd ever been ready for. They were sitting by the window, sharing a battered packet of biscuits, their conversation light and peaceful, the kind of ease she never used to believe was possible. Then her burner phone, the cheap one she'd used to keep her real life at arm's length, buzzed violently on the table, slicing through the calm like an alarm. The screen showed a number she recognized instantly. Adaku Holdings' emergency line. Her stomach twisted. She grabbed the phone and stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding. "Miss Ifeoma," her assistant's voice crackled urgently. "You need to come right away. There's an emergency board meeting. Legal issues. Your aunt and uncles are trying to take away your power. They're moving fast." Ifeoma closed her eyes and leaned back against the cool wall. This was what she had feared. While she'd been hiding in borrowed peace, the wolves were sharpening their teeth. "I'll be there," she said, her voice low and steady. "I'm coming now." She hung up and stood for a long moment, feeling everything shift beneath her. Then she turned back into the apartment. Tunde was still there, waiting quietly. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I have to go," she said, forcing a small smile. She bent down and grabbed the backpack she had stashed in the corner days ago. Tunde's frown deepened. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I just have something important to deal with," she said, trying to keep her tone light. Her entire body screamed, "Tell him now," but she couldn't, not yet. Not when everything is already falling apart. "I will call you," she promised. Tunde nodded slowly, confused but trusting. Ifeoma gave him one last smile, broken, tender, full of things she couldn't say, and slipped out into the night. The next morning, news channels exploded with one headline after another. Young heiress, Ifeoma Adaku, takes control of Adaku Holdings, a mid-family showdown. The images showed Ifeoma dressed in a sharp black suit, her hair tied back, standing strong against flashing cameras. Her name and her legacy were now impossible to hide. Meanwhile, Tunde stood frozen in a small cafe where he usually grabbed breakfast. He stared at the screen, at Ifeoma, his Ifeoma. The girl who slept on his mattress, laughed about noisy neighbors, stirred jollof rice with a wooden spoon, who never said a word about her real life. A painful emptiness gaped inside him. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she lied? His coffee turned cold in his hand. He barely noticed when someone bumped into him. All he felt was that roaring silence, the sharp sting of betrayal. That night, Tunde didn't go home. He wandered through the city long after the neon lights faded. He ignored all of Ifeoma's calls and texts. He couldn't bring himself to answer. Somewhere between the trust they'd built and her secret, something in him had shattered, and he wasn't sure it could ever heal. Outside Tunde's apartment door, Ifeoma stood in pouring rain, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes drenched, but she didn't care. She had knocked for 30 minutes. No answer. She tried again, softer. "Tunde, please," she whispered against the door. "It's me." Silence. Her heart twisted. All the calls, the texts, nothing. In a diner across town, Tunde sat hunched in a booth, his plate untouched. He didn't want to face her. He didn't want to hear her explain. Inside, he was afraid that if he looked at her again, his anger would melt and only pain would remain. He stirred his coffee, inhaling the bitterness. He told himself she didn't trust him, that she treated him like everyone else, rich, entitled. But the real truth, the one he didn't want to admit, even to himself, was plain. He missed her. He missed her laugh filling his tiny apartment, the messy cooking sessions, the way she held a chipped mug at the window, smiling at nothing. And he hated himself for missing her, because missing her didn't change the fact that she lied. Days passing didn't make things better. The city carried on, but inside, Ifeoma, time stopped. Back in the Grand Adaku mansion, everything looked the same. Shiny floors, fancy art, glittering chandeliers, but it all felt empty. Without her parents, without her brother, without Tunde, it was hollow. Every meeting, every press conference, every headline calling her the Iron Heiress only made the silence inside grow deeper. Every night, when she pulled off her heels and dropped onto her large bed, she replayed one memory over and over. Tunde's eyes, the last time he looked at her, not angry, not hateful, just broken. And that hurt more than politics or power ever could. One evening in her office, she stared at the city lights. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly. Her Aunt Chioma, who used to be cold towards her, suddenly became proud of her when she recently told her, "You're building an empire. Your father would be proud." Ifeoma had nodded, but inside she wondered, would he be proud if he knew how empty I feel? She missed Tunde, not because he made her feel rich, but because he made her feel real. No matter how many buildings she owned, or contracts she signed, or how many magazines her face covers, it meant nothing without someone to share it with. Someone who didn't just want her, but saw her for herself. Not the Adaku name, someone like Tunde. And deep down, she knew he still did. That love was still there, hidden beneath hurt and walls they'd built, waiting. That realization brought her here, parked across the street from Adaku Holdings. The rain had stopped, and the pavement glowed under the city lights. She gripped the steering wheel hard, heart pounding. What if he doesn't want to see me? What if it's too late? She thought. But another stronger voice answered, "You didn't come this far to run away now." She'd fought for her father's empire, for her own survival. Now, she had to fight for what mattered most, her heart, his heart, their future. With a shaky breath, Ifeoma stepped out of the car, ready to face whatever came next. Inside Adaku Holdings, Tunde stood in the lobby. He had closed for the day and was watching the stars through the large glass window. Then, he heard his name. Tunde? He froze. When he looked up, there she was. Not the glossy magazine heiress or the cold CEO on television, just Ifeoma. She wore jeans, sneakers, a plain sweater. No makeup, no jewelry. Simply herself. His heart tightened. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low and guarded. Ifeoma stepped closer, every nerve screaming. "I came to say all the things I should have said long ago," she stammered, voice trembling. Tunde stayed silent, his face unreadable. "I lied," she confessed, her throat thick with emotion. "I didn't tell you who I really was because I was afraid. Afraid you'd treat me differently. Afraid I'd lose the only real thing I'd ever had." Tunde's fists clenched tightly. "You should have trusted me," he said quietly. "I know," tears welled in her eyes. "I was selfish. I thought I was protecting something fragile, but I was wrong." Her voice cracked wide open. "You didn't fall for Ifeoma Adaku. You fell for me, the clumsy girl who sings off-key, can't cook, fears pigeons, the one who loved silly coffee and burnt jollof and rainy days with you." Tunde's face remained still, but his eyes shifted, flickering with emotion. "I don't care about the money," she said, voice softer now. "I don't care about the name. I'd give it all up. The company, the houses, just for one more night in that tiny apartment with you, eating burnt rice." She took a steady breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I'm not asking you to forget what I did." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm asking for a chance to show it wasn't a lie, that what we had was real. I love you, Tunde, with everything I am." She stood there, trembling but brave, her heart laid bare, hoping. Tunde stared at her for a really long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek, so softly it broke something inside her. "You were real," he said, voice rough. "You still are." Her heart overflowed. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. Tunde held her tightly, breathing her in, feeling the broken pieces of his heart start knitting themselves back together. Not because she was perfect, not because she was rich, but because she was his. Broken, flawed, honest, real. And he loved her. God, he loved her too much. It had been a month since that lifeline moment in the Adaku Holdings building, a month of slow healing, honest talks, and rebuilding something stronger than before. Now, there were no more lies between Ifeoma and Tunde. She had shown him the high-stakes world of boardrooms, skyscrapers, and the crushing expectations she now carried. In return, he showed her his world, the calmness of quiet mornings, the quiet pride of building life step by step, and the joy of simple, earned progress. Their worlds were wildly different, but their hearts fit. Tunde refused all the extravagant gifts Ifeoma offered, like cars or designer clothes. He didn't want to be bought. He wanted to stand beside her with his own worth. So she offered something else instead, a partnership, a real future together. She created a new division within Adaku Holdings, a foundation to support promising youth from underprivileged backgrounds. Tunde became the head because he was perfect for it, not because she owed him. He built the Golden Rise Initiative from scratch, helping dreamers overlooked by society. Together they brought hope to hundreds who had been told they weren't enough. Tunde wasn't just surviving anymore, he was leading. And Ifeoma, she smiled, she laughed, it felt like living again. Not because she rescued an empire, but because she built her own home, with love, trust, and second chances. One soft evening, under a starry sky in the garden behind the mansion, which had once felt icy and empty, Tunde knelt before Ifeoma. The garden was now alive with light and laughter. Ifeoma gasped, tears filling her eyes instantly. He held a simple silver ring, no diamonds, just a promise. "I don't have an empire," he said softly. "I don't have a fortune. All I have is my heart, and it's yours, if you'll have it." Iphioma dropped to her knees, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll have it," she whispered, embracing him. They kissed beneath the open sky. No walls, no secrets, no fear. Just love. Pure, real, unbreakable. Together, Iphioma and Tunde walked toward a future not built on money or legacy, but on the magic of choosing each other, every single day, forever. And that's the end of Iphioma and Tunde's incredible journey. A story of love, resilience, and second chances. But this isn't the end for us. Every week, we dive into new tales just like this. Stories that will pull at your heart, challenge your mind, and remind you of the power of hope. So, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join our community of storytellers. Trust me, the next story might just be the one you've been waiting for.